Let's see if Twitch knows that I'm streaming. Hit reload. And if it spits ads out, then we're streaming. Yay! Alright. Pop on over to Twitter and tell them that I'm streaming. Hurrah! Streaming indie dev, spaceships, and serialization. And I don't think I need this headset. Yay. Alright, oh, where is Twitch? There it is. Alright, so it says that we're offline. I think that just is its way of telling me that it's streaming but nobody's watching. At least I hope so. As usual, B. Wheatley and Pinkhair are listed as in the chat, and they probably just have their sound turned off. And they'll stop by sometime in 8 or 9 hours and wonder where the stream went. So we got a couple of things on our plate for today. We've got to do some serialization, and we've got to do some more art. Serialization is probably the more important of the two, so maybe we should start on that, unless someone has strong opinions about it. So we pull up some scripts here. In the previous version, what we've done is we've created this room serializer and ship component serializer, which we no longer need. At least I hope not. So the reason that we created them was simply because in order to use the JSON utility built into Unity, it has to be a mono behavior, which is kind of hilarious, and that made it difficult to serialize and deserialize pure data classes. Grind, grind, grind. Grind, grind, grind. Come on, mono develop. There we are. So basically, this ship component serializer exists only because the Unity system didn't allow us to just straight up serialize a class, even if it's marked as serializable. So what we're going to do is try it out. Let's go ahead and try it out right here with JSON utility dot toJSON, and then we will pass it a new ship component serialization. And we'll just go ahead and see whether or not that gives us any errors. Oh, not echo. Debug.log. And we'll hit... Oh, I guess I should publish the video on YouTube. That's not YouTube. That's YouTube. Oh, it's published. Hurrah. I've got to pass it something, huh? Null. If component equals null, return. Debug.log warning. No component passed to serializer. Of course, we're going to redo all of this. None of this makes sense anymore. So we'll go ahead and just see how it works. If it works. So let's drop in a Blumpo. Lots of errors. Look at this. Upgrading to 5.5 wasn't completely flawless. But I think the room serializer problem is unrelated, because we gave up last time. Max energy reached. That's interesting, because we fixed that last time, didn't we? Huh. Well, let's see whether or not this works. So here you can see that it has serialized the fuel tank and so on. What we're looking for is at the top here. No component passed to serializer, name, manufacturer, catalog position. Yes! It works. So we can completely rewrite all of this garbage. We don't need it anymore. It's all crap. And so in order to do it all over again, what we're going to do is just comment the whole shebang out. We don't need any of it. But we'd rather not lose it until we have it written better. And public class ship component. We actually don't even need to do it like this anymore either, do we? So we'll just leave it all intact for the moment, just to prevent errors. But what we're going to do is on ship component, we will create a serialize function. Public void, public string JSON. And we will go ahead and copy over the basic ideas here, which is this. So there are a few things that we need when we are serializing JSON, or when we're serializing the system. What we did before is we built a class and then filled it in. I guess that's... We have the option of either manually serializing these elements or creating a class and then having the class get serialized. The difference is relatively minor. But I guess it's probably worth doing it via class, just because it's a little bit more robust. Although, it's not as version safe, is it? The two options are create a manual version, or can we... I don't remember whether or not we're allowed to create class declarations in C# inside of functions. Probably not, right? Oh, can't. So here's the issue. We're going to have some version differences as time goes on. If we create it as a class, we're going to have the class serialized differently depending on the version. Or we're going to have to give up on anything that's older than the version. So right now, we're going to use JSON to serialize the ship just by having a class that has these values and passing JSON, passing it out and then serializing this class, which is a fairly straightforward way of doing things. But what happens when we have to add a new element to this? We'll have to scrap all of our old serialization. We could always descend from ship component serialization if we need to. Well, let's worry about all this later. For now, we'll just go ahead and use the ship component serialization properly. So, new ship component serialization. This. Dot serialize. ToString. There we go. We'll go over into our ship component serializer and override the ToString. Public override string ToString. There we are. Return JSON utility.toJSON this. Easy enough, right? We're also going to want the ability to store those strings and use them to create new objects. So previously we've been doing that down here in this deserialize function, but what we're going to do is we're going to do all of this stuff up here in a static class. A static function. Public static ship component deserialize. String serialization. So in order to deserialize it, we're going to go ahead and create one of these. Ship component serialization, SCS equals new ship component serialization. But we're not actually going to do it like that. We're going to use JSON utility, and we're going to use from JSON ship component serialization, and we'll pass it to JSON, like so. And then we're going to return scs.deserialize. And that will be its own function. Like this. So in this function, we're going to be creating a ship component, and we're going to be returning it based on our own values, these values here. So let's take a look at how we used to do that. We first need to so let's go ahead and actually write that as a comment. Create a ship component based on our values. Get the catalog that we're in. So, but previously we had we were just going through every single one of our ship components, and we did a little bit of optimization where we presumed that each ship component was probably in the same catalog as the last one. But this time we're going to have to go ahead and find the catalog ourselves. Catalog manifest cm equals catalog manifest.find. We have a manufacturer and a catalog that we're going to need. Manufacturer catalog. Those are variables that we have in our class, as you can see. And since they're filled in, we don't have any problems. Catalog manifest. So what we're going to want to do is... see, that's the same thing we did here, except for catalog is a word that we're using somewhere else. So here we're going to say if catalog manifest equals null, debug.log error and return null. There we are. Like so. I don't see anything wrong with that line. I think that MonoDevelop is just fritzing out because of all the weird-ass indentation happening here. We say if not catalog manifest.loaded, then catalog.loaded equals true. Should have just loaded the catalog. So in here, we're looking through all of the components for one that's named the same thing as we are. If name equals catalog manifest, or if name.starts with, just in case that it's been, tagged with a 2 or a clone. There we are. So here we're going to go ahead and note that we can spawn it. So look through the loaded catalog for the named part. Make sure the catalog is loaded. So we found our component, and we're going to go ahead and create it. Now, the problem is that setParent isn't going to be able to happen very easily. We're going to want to pass it a transform ship, so that we can put it someplace in the actual scene view. Otherwise, it'll just pop in randomly. So here we're going to set it to position, scale, and rotation. And we need to do that after setting it to inside of a transform, because otherwise it'll be global, and that wouldn't work very well. And then we just say return ship component. if we get down here, no component found, error out. And there's some debug code for you. Return null. So now what should happen is serialize and deserialize should work just out of the ship component serialization rather than ever needing a ship serializer. So this ship component serializer is useless now, and we shouldn't ever need it. But we will still need a method to serialize a whole ship, because right now we're just serializing the components one by one. There's a lot of other things that we'll need to think about. But this, fundamentally, this is a means to offload our serialization. We could get the same results from actually recording our values and just manually sticking them in a string and then saving the string. But because we're going through a JSON utility, it'll come out as human readable. People will be able to edit it. There won't be any confusion by any modder ever. So that should be great. All we need to do now is make this work. So we've got it working here where we can call the JSON of the ship component, but we're going to need a static value for ship components. We're not even going to need it, actually, because it's already existing in the ship component serializer. So there we go. That should do the trick, but we have to integrate it with the entire ship. So if we take a look... okay, so we can't have it the same thing here, unfortunately. Call this one load. Oh. String serialization, transform ship. Let's see. We've got a couple of viewers now. None of them has said anything. I don't know whether that's because the chat's broken or because I'm so boring they don't want to say anything. But welcome to Arast, Arif, Generic Sprite, and Zgor. Today we're going to be doing some serialization, and when we're done with that, we're going to be modeling some ships. We're having all sorts of warnings because I upgraded to the newest beta version, and not everything is fully compatible. We'll have to work with that. So here's the parts list for our ship. And as you can see, the ship component serializer is the parent here on the parts list. And what we need to do is this has a function in it which just goes through all of the components of the ship and serializes them. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with that except for the fact that it doesn't need to exist. We can load that into the ship object itself. So let's head on over to the ship itself. Here it is. And if we wanted to serialize the whole ship, all we have to do is know what transforms we're serializing. In fact, we could even use the component list, but probably don't need to do that. There might be some flaws if we do that bad here. So we've got some region blocking already set up. Let's go ahead and set up another region. All of these regions are going to get big in the long run. So this region will be our serialization region. I see that Pink Hair finally turned his sound on. So what we're going to want is a call to serialize this. And the way we're going to serialize it is the same way that we used to serialize it down here. We're going to look through all of the possible ships, all of the possible catalogs, and serialize them. Down here. Down here! There it is. That's deserialize. Serialize. There it is. put that on the ship. So what we're going to do is get all of the components in the correct transform, which would be the parts transform. We already have it stored. Now, if you've got ship components that aren't in the parts transform, then they might be, I don't know, cargo or something. We'll have to worry about that some other day. But we're grabbing them even if they're disabled. And then what we're going to do is create a long array of these objects. And we couldn't do this before because JSON utility couldn't serialize arrays. It could only serialize monobehaviors. But now it should be able to serialize an array. So let's go ahead and create an array of strings. And let's go through each one of our strings and each one of our components and turn it into a string. So serializations.add, spell it right, pass it the item that we want to add, which is a ship component serialization dot, it doesn't have a, we would have to create a new one, huh? Let's go ahead and create another static object, another static class for function, one of those things. Public static string serialize ship component return. Oh wait, we don't have to do that. What the hell am I talking about? We already programmed this. I'm just being a frigging idiot. Because all we need to do is call this function here. Although it should probably be called serialize to fit in with the rest. So rather than this, we'll just say components a dot serialize. Boom. Easy peasy. Right? So then what we're going to do is return that the array as a JSON utility. So return JSON utility to JSON and then the array. Now there are a lot of things we can do here. We could save this in a variety of ways. The ship should probably contain its own serialization values. Except, yeah, I guess that probably would be best, wouldn't it? We'll go ahead and do that here. I'm a little bit concerned about strings, because they might get kind of long. By might, I mean they will absolutely get incredibly long. Strings aren't the most space-efficient way to store data, and we're not even compressing them. But we'll worry about that later. Public string, that's not public. Parts serialization equals not serialized. Parts serialization equals that. And then return parts serialization. Now there are a lot of things we could do here to optimize this by checking and making sure that parts serialization hasn't been filled yet. But we actually want to allow reserialization on the fly. This gets complicated because we're going to have two different kinds of serialization arguing with each other. We're going to have instantiated ships with different serializations than the database side ships. Things like different fuel levels, damaged parts, that sort of stuff. And we're going to have to worry about that. But it's actually a feature, because we'll be able to compare each of those individually to each other, and they'll be in the same order all the time. So we can just look and see, is this serialization, is this string in this array the exact same as the one in the database? Pretty easy, right? To the extent where I'm tempted to not even make this a serialized array. I'm tempted to actually just make it an array, a string array, for ease of comparison. It's not really any flabbier, so let's go ahead and do it. So parts serialization equals serializations to array, And then this is JSON utility dot to JSON parts serialization. There we are. So let's write down some of those thoughts just in case we lose track of them later. Tooltip, auto generated serialization. More in detail, parts serialization array should be the same order as the DB version, and therefore parts can be compared for identicality without loading them. Load only the parts you need. Load/simulate only the parts you need. Of course, the parts serializations, note these are ship component serializations, not actual ship component, not actual serialized ship components. Haha. So, I don't know whether anyone knows what I'm doing here, but because I installed the new version of Unity, I can stop doing all of the clunky serialization I was doing and instead use an actual set of optimized classes for it. And what you've just watched, if you've been here for half an hour, is me doing that for half an hour. And I've just replaced this entire class here, this long-ass class, with a couple lines of code in certain other classes. It's much more straightforward. But we don't yet have a deserialize, so public void deserialize parts. So to do that, all we need to do is go through each of them and load them up. So for int a equals 0, a is less than parts serialization.length a++, and we will say debug.log instantiating parts. And how many parts are we instantiating? Oh, that's PHP. It's not going to work. Parts serialization.length plus parts. And because we have all of these instantiated pieces, all these strings, we can instantiate them using our ship component serializer. Serialization.deserialize. Pass them the parts serialization and the ship that we're trying to instantiate. It's actually not the ship itself. We're passing it the transform that it's planning to use for our parts. There we go. Now, at the end of this, we still want to tell the ship to clean itself up. So we can call meta-clean, and I think that's probably the best option. I think we'll want to call it right away rather than waiting, because we can call it slowly by setting meta-clean to dirty, or setting the object to dirty, and then it'll automatically get called the next time it gets hit. But it may never get hit, so it may not be loaded up into the scene, and it may never actually get called with an update. So let's go ahead and clean it up immediately. It's not like we're going to be deserializing every frame or anything. If we are, that's a different issue. So now we have serialized and deserialized parts. What we're going to do is here, in Awake, we're going to go ahead and just try it out. So serialize debug.log ship serialization plus serialize. We're going to delete all of our parts. For each transform t in parts transform. Destroy t.gameObject. And then we're going to deserialize. Let's see whether or not that works. Oh. It's throwing me warnings about high celestial bodies. A couple of changes here and there. That should be okay. I mean, that's an unrelated piece of script. So what did we get here? We look over at the Blumpo, and you can see that we cloned everything. So these are all clones now, which is good, except for we don't actually want them to say clone at the end. I guess it's okay for, you know, what we're doing at the moment. But what we really wanted to do is to have the exact same name, because it's a little bit faster. So ship component serialize, yeah, so working, serializing 30 components. Okay, should have just loaded catalog, spawned, 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 spawned. And there's the ship telling us this is a serialization, and as you can see, it's fairly in-depth, but nowhere near in-depth enough. There we go. No problem. Alright, so that's working. You can see how now they don't say clone anymore. What we're going to want to do is go on over to the ship component serializer and make sure that we name the part correctly. Name. Hey Wonker. I hope you've had a good week. We're serializing. And we've actually done a lot of good work fixing up the serializer. We no longer need this entire class down here. It can go. Boom. And what we're going to do instead is rename this file to serialization so that it's named correctly. Boom. And we might have to delete this because it doesn't exist. Goodbye. And we'll go ahead and apply that. So now we have a much better serializer for our ship, but we have a couple of issues. When we serialize our parts, we're not taking into account any sort of customization that happens. So for example, we've got things like these fuel tanks. Now the fuel tank has a lot of details that can change, but they're all represented by mix-ins. So resource, max amount, amount, priority, not all of those need to be serialized, but we do need to serialize the amount that's currently in there if we want to ever keep track. Otherwise, people will save and then load and they'll have all their fuel back. And it gets more complicated with rooms and stuff. So what we're going to need to do is work out a way to serialize these individual pieces and to deserialize them afterwards. The good news is they're always going to be in the same order within the object. The bad news is we won't actually know what they are. So let's go ahead and set up... I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this without making it too obnoxious. Really, the problem is we have two different serialization regimes. We've got the one that saves this as a prefab, but then we've got the one that saves it as a modification to a prefab. Yeah, I changed to 5.5, so it's got this orange highlight around everything. I'm not sure whether that's an LOD specific thing. Yeah, I guess it's not. But I like the orange highlight a little bit better. It does not reflect anything I programmed, though, and it has some really junky look to it when you are highlighting things that have a lot of faces. So the problem is that there are a couple of ways to do this, and they're all obnoxious. I don't want to code a custom serializer for every single object. What I should really have is a system that compares the serialization of this object to the serialization of the version of it in the database. and only saves the differences, but I don't actually know how to do that. I don't know how to keep track of the prefab that we're part of normally, but I do know how to do that this time, because our system actually contains its own prefab search function right here in this. This actually tells us exactly where to find the prefab. But I don't know how to combine it so that I can find the prefab and compare all of the values. I could use reflection. It seems like it would get kind of slow. That's probably the best way to do it, using reflection. Alright, well, let's see how that works. Let's go ahead and pop something up and implement some reflection. Public string serialize. Oh, wait, I've already got that. Look at this. Return new ship component serialization this to string. That's the ship component. I don't want the ship component. I want the ship mixin. There it is. This is what I wanted. Public string serialize. This only serializes the difference between us and the prefab. I didn't participate. I don't know if you're the third person to ask or whether you've just asked 3 times, but I don't participate in those game dev jams just because I'm very good at filling my time. So I never have a weekend free. I'd have to have, like, my friends would have to come by and be like, let's do this, like a month in advance, which would be kind of fun, but I don't think I have any friends that are game jam devs. Most of my game dev friends have left for greener pastures, including me. So what we're going to get here is we're going to want to also have our ship component mixin prefab. There we are. We're going to want to make sure that we are the same type. So if type of this does not equal type of prefab, debug.log error cannot compare distinct types plus type of, I thought type of this would work. Do I have the wrong word? Is it not type of? I was like 90% sure it was type of. Why is there nothing after this? Is there something wrong here? Freaking weird. Get type. Sorry. There we are. So we can only compare 2 ship component mixins that are exactly the same type. We're also going to have to include the serializations. Nah, I've forgotten what they're called. I'll go ahead and figure it out here. Serialize, it's reflection, I think is what it's called. Using system.reflection. There it is. So what we're going to want to do is get a list of all of our properties. I can't remember whether it's properties or... There's a couple of things, and sometimes the wording gets confused for me. So if I take a look at this get type dot attributes. Find interfaces or find members. Oh, come on. There. Make array type. Oh, interesting. Blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. There we are. Get properties or get methods or get, I think it's probably get properties. That sounds right. Which is, returns property info. So we'll get a string of property, or sorry, an array of property infos based on that. Let's just go through them and see what it has to say for itself. So for each props property info prop in props debug.log props dot props prop dot name. There it is. Debug.log properties for name. There we are. So I think that we'll probably want to put this, just for now, we'll put this after. And what we'll do is we will go ahead and create a public void start serialize null. Can you give me an error? No error? That seems to work for you? How odd. Alright, so here we got a couple of things going on here. So we get some errors, but all of the properties are not... Uncollapse it, maybe. Yeah, here we are. Here's all these properties, and you can see that there's way too many damn properties. We got the room name, the desk, the current room, functional. These are all correct, but things like use, GUI, and hinge joint and stuff, those are not what we need. So basically what we would like to do is exclude all of the properties that aren't part of our class proper. And that's actually possible. I just have to remember how to do it. Prop dot... do 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 do. I think this is wrong. There should be a way to tell whether or not it is a member of this specific class. Oh. Interesting. I don't think that's correct, though. I haven't done this in a while, and I can't remember how to get it to tell me whether or not... I don't know if you can hear that, but that is loud as hell. Gets the module in which the type that declares the member represented by the current member info is defined. Is that what I needed? I don't know. Module. I think that's probably not it. Let's try it. Boom, there we are. So you can see that these all go to the Unity DLL, but when we get up to our stuff, it changes over to assembly C#.dll, but that's not going to tell us what class it's defined in. That's only going to tell us that it's not part of the Unity engine and is instead custom. That may be fine, though. It may be that that's all we actually need to do. Just make sure that it's not part of the Unity engine, because the Unity engine stuff is the stuff that we don't customize. That's super clunky, though. I know that there is a way to determine whether or not something is defined in a specific class. I just don't know what it is. Maybe it's not a properties, maybe it's something else. This dot get type dot I don't actually remember what member info is. So member type I guess it's a super version. Oh, it just includes absolutely everything. So that's not what we need. So you guys tell me, should I stop doing this for a while and do art instead? Because I got a lot of spaceships to draw. And I don't mind drawing spaceships for a while. Get fields? I sort of think that fields are what I want rather than properties. Alright, so here we can see the fields. This is much better. Because our fields only includes a couple of details based on what is publicly available to our ship as an actual field. Meaning that it's not going to include all of the random junk that comes with Unity. You can see that this is only including the stuff we actually want to check. So this will work. All we really need to do is compare it to the prefab and see whether or not there is a difference. So down here, we're going to say, we're going to go ahead and set up the thing that it compares it first. So let's go back to our ship component serializer, which isn't open at the moment because we renamed it. There it is. And we're going to go ahead and get all of the mix-ins. So let's go ahead and do that. Public, ship component mix-ins. Dakarine says I should stay with the code. Okay, I will do that then. Equals get equals component dot get components. Yeah, I gotta spell stuff right at some point. In children, ship component mix-in. And then what we can say is debug.log name component dot name plus has plus mixins dot length mixins. For each ship component mixin in mixins. So we're going to have a string here for a string array here for all of our mixins. Like so. And we're just going to go ahead and spit into our array mixin serializations dot add mixin dot serialize, and then the prefab. So this is where things get a little bit rough, because at the moment we do not make any distinction between the prefab that is actually on the ship and the prefab that is in our overall view, in our game. So what we need to do is we need to get the serializations from the version of the component that's in the database as opposed to the version of the component we're actually looking at. Whew. The problem is that there's really no easy way to do that right now. So we'll just go ahead and add in a way to do that by putting in a new value, which will be prefab or stock. So we'll go over into our ship component and add that value. Public ship component stock, like so. Tooltip automatically points to the database version of us. Easily done. So what we're going to do is in our ship component creation kit here, when we are actually serializing and deserializing, we're going to go ahead and have those manually point to the slot. The problem is, if we were to just make that a recursive loop in the database, when we initialize it, when we instantiate it, it's going to continue to point to the thing that's been instantiated. It'll just point to itself rather than to the original prefab. And there are tricks that you can do to make it point to the original prefab. I don't happen to have any of them memorized, but since all of our prefabs should be getting created through this technique, we can go ahead and just set it up to use this in here, right here. sc.stock equals, and then we'll point to the catalog. And that will allow us to tell the difference between them. Now, there are a couple of things that aren't like that because they're already loaded, like these guys here. And what we're going to do for now is we're going to just manually set that up. It doesn't appear to have taken. Oh, we actually have to get the specific mix-in. So and Bradley DM stopped by to say, "Oh, pretty, what game is this?" Well, this is Mono Develop, but the game is called The Galactic Line. And it's kind of like The Sims in space a little bit. And what I'm doing now is I'm working on annoying back-end serialization code in order to let us have thousands of ships in the game world at once without any slowdown. And it is a little bit annoying. There we are. So now that we have these, we're going to go ahead and we can't do a for each anymore. We're going to have to do a for. A is less than mixins.length, a plus plus. And we will say mixins a.serialize prefab mixins A, because they'll always be in the same order. And Bamboy says, "Hey, Perko. Hey, Bamboy. I'm working on serialization code. It's amazingly fun, I'm sure. Those of you who are in Europe can use me to lull you to sleep." So at the end of this, we will have a number of mixins. So debug.log serialize. Well, we don't need to do that. It's actually already in there. So let's go ahead and try it out. See what happens here. The problem is that our stock values need to be set right here, because this is like a debug system, and these stock values are not actually defined. So we're going to go ahead and drag it into itself for the ones we care about, at least. And I think that's the only one at the moment. Maybe these guys. Well, we have a prefab for those. Prefab. Now we'll probably end up with a lot of errors. We'll find out. So we loaded them all up, and we named one of them has one mixins. Huh. Let's try that again without the stupid, shall we? But at least we know it's operating. So we've got a lot of errors here, but that's because these are nulls. And we're going to go ahead and live with those for the moment. We'll come back to them later. So here you can see what we're doing is has one mixin, property for mixin, stockpile, resource, max amount, and priority. So that's exactly what we want to do. What we're going to do is compare those values to each other. So down here in our mixins, where is it? There it is. We have this system where we're going through each of the fields for our type. But what we want to do is only care about whether the fields have changed from the one in the other prefab. So we're going to go ahead and just check the values. If field.getValue this does not equal field.getValue prefab. So if you haven't used serialize RF mirroring before, what I'm doing is I'm reflecting it. I lost track of what I was doing to try and explain it. The reflection here is we have this field, and we're saying get the value from this class, the same class, but get the value from this instance and this instance. And if they're not the same, let's go ahead and spit out the difference. Is different. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and just say they're the same. Bamboy says, "What are your thoughts on ProBuilder?" I like all of those relatively high-end level block-out systems in Unity. It's sort of like playing with tile-based, old-school tile-based map making, but super 3D. I've used them lots. I think I own most of them. I've never used them in a product that I've given out. I've never, none of my various tutorials or demos have ever used them. But they're really great for quickly blocking things out. And if you can afford them, I definitely recommend them. So we've got a whole bunch of things where it's different here. So resource is the same, max amount is different, amount is different, and priority is different. Really. That shouldn't be possible, given that it's pointing to itself. Let's take a look. It could be that when it's in a prefab state, it has a different response. That will be annoying. Priority is different, 10 out of 10. So it's getting the correct values, but for some reason they're registering as different. That's interesting. Why would that be? Let's see if they count as different types for some reason. So field info is what we do when we're trying to use reflection. We don't know what the object is. We don't know what the class is. And we're just saying, well, can that class give me all of its variables, all of the things on it, such as the resource, the max amount, the amount, and the priority. But we don't know that those are what we're looking for. We just know that it has some values. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to compare the version that's in the scene with the version that's in the database and only keep the changes. And that's very important for these complicated objects because I don't want to have to load them. I want to just load up a couple of small changes. So they're both singles. Maybe it's because they're references? Is it operating as a reference rather than a value? It might be operating as it. Oh, that's a C# built-in functionality. System.reflections. If you're going to get into reflections, be aware that they're kind of slow. That's one of the reasons why, for such a long time, Space Engineers ran like crap. Because it was using reflection for almost everything. It still runs like crap in certain situations, but not those. So I think that the problem is that these have different... I think that they're counting as references rather than just flat types. So they're not counting as equal. If we switch them both to strings, I bet they'll work. But that's like super expensive. Yeah, that does work. I wonder if there's a way to dereference them. Well, we could use the manual equals, but it should just be overridden. Wait, was I being stupid? No, I wasn't being stupid. I mean, I probably still am being stupid, but it's a different stupid. Hurrah! Yeah, so the counting is different, even though they are the same. Not only are they the same, they're literally the same object. They're pointing to the same field on the same class on the same object. So it looks like the equals isn't going to work. Unless we can do it with getValueDirect. Typed reference, huh? So if we use the typed reference, maybe... I don't know. Let's find out. Errors? Cannot convert ship component mixin to typed reference. Okay, so that's not going to work after all. Is it? Oh, I got it backwards because I'm just an idiot. I'm sorry. It's been so long since I've done this, but I honestly don't know why these aren't resolving properly. I mean, one of the things I can do is just have manual code that makes them into floats. If they're strings, this works. It's only if they're floats, and presumably integers, that they screw up. Which is very strange. You would think that that wouldn't be an issue. If field.fieldType equals float, debug.log float. Let's see whether or not it triggers properly when we do this. You didn't like that? We're mucking around with some annoying C# here. I don't recommend trying to copy this, because I'm kind of feeling my way forward. Why are we still using a get value? Oh, just forgot to change it back. That's fine. So if we take a look now, it's a float. It's a float. Okay, so they're triggering as floats, which means that we can manually test them as different. I don't know if we can do that with a switch. We'll do it with an if statement for now. Else debug.log not a float plus field.name. I get the feeling I screwed that up a second ago. I did. Look at that. Is that going to work after all? Sorry, when you forget to put a not sign in front of stuff, it really does make it so that stupid stuff happens. Let's go ahead and take a look here. Blandboy says maybe using this isn't a good idea. Maybe you should compare outside of the object. I need to have references to the object in order to get the reflection going, and I don't know why this would be any more broken than anything else. Although it might be, I suppose. Okay, look at this. Now it works. So I was just being painfully stupid, I guess. So let's test this. So it just turns out that the real problem here is that the equals haven't been overridden properly. If you use the dot equals function, it works, but otherwise it doesn't. So that should be okay. Well, I can't agree with you on that, Bamboy, but I definitely botched that pretty badly. So here we can see that it is working. All these are now the same. And all we really need to do is start to make this all work out by returning JSON utility dot oh, this isn't going to work out quite so easily, is it? Because we don't know what type they are. They're all assortments of different types. We could have it so that the only thing that can vary is a numeric value. For now, let's go ahead and leave it like this, just so we know that it's working or not working. But you can see that we have a whole bunch of errors here. And all of them are related to the fact that the prefab doesn't exist. So we'll go ahead and knock that off. If prefab equals null, debug.log warning, serializing plus name plus doesn't work because of missing prefab data. Still got some that slipped through here, huh? Oh, I forgot to return. Return. Oh. So obviously these rooms don't work right because we haven't given them the actual data that they need. And that's because the room serializer is broken, and we're not ever going to actually use it. So let's go ahead and delete all of these room serializers. Because the room is just another mix-in. We don't need to worry about it. Bamboy says, any interesting ideas for a light RPG combat system? Well, that sounds like something the chat can get in on, but I've got thousands. RPGs are a really easy thing to innovate with because the combat is kind of secondary, so even if you screw it up, it's not terribly critical. You need to make it interesting, but you don't need to make it absolutely perfect. People use typical combat engines because combat's kind of hard to program, and if you have a typical combat engine, people just generally use it. Well, if you want to see some basics, I mean, I've written about this at least a dozen times over the past couple of years, but I would recommend playing Radiant Historia, which is a really excellent 3DS game, and it has some RPG combat that's just different enough to feel unique, but still very familiar, and it's the sort of thing you could do in RPG Maker if you wanted to. It's definitely, in my opinion, one of the best 3DS games, just period. So here we've got some problems with the stock, so if component.stock equals null, then debug.log warning, no stock link for plus component dot name component, come on, dot stock equals component. Yeah, Unity is pretty great for creating action-based RPG engines. So you could do something a little bit like Valkyria Chronicles. That kind of action-based RPG stuff works really well in Unity. Any kind of action-based RPG will do well in Unity, whether it's 2D or 3D, whether it's first-person camera, or second-person camera, or third-person camera. All of that stuff is pretty smooth. The question is whether or not your enemies are going to be integrated into your levels, or whether you have random encounters that happen on a different playing field. Rocket Engine has 0 mix-ins. Fins has 0 mix-ins. Fins 1 has 0 mix-ins. All these have 0 mix-ins. Well, that's fine. Here we are, 2 mix-ins. Resource, max amount, and priority is all the same. So let's go ahead and change one of these out. So if we were to make this actually point to the correct prefab, like this, uh, 4.3 fuel tank. There we are. Then what we can do is change one of these values, and it should say that it's different. Hmm. 4 meter through fuel tank has different values. Amount is different. Aha! So that worked. And then what we can do is we can add in the name of the field and the new value. The problem is that the new value could be a string, or could be a float, or it could be an integer, could be anything. Bamboy says, I recently joined someone making a story-heavy RPG based in ancient China. I'm doing all of the programming, and they don't have any particular ideas for combat. I think it's a set of encounters at different points in the story. Well, if you're doing a Chinese RPG, then, you know, a Wuxia-style combat would be pretty neat, but it might involve too much effort because combat like that would require a lot of animations. Another option is that you could go for a slightly more Korean flair with the Korean version of Wuxia is largely about special moves instead of about actual kung fu. and it's much, much easier to animate. Similar to the way where, in FF1, all of your fighting techniques would be the same sprite motion, but then there'd be a different weapon or a different flare attack or whatever. But the problem is making that into an action sort of setting would still require a lot of animations. If you're doing action-based RPGs, you're signing up for extra assets. You're going to need to create animations for all the characters and create, fireballs and stuff. But the more special attack-based it is, as opposed to beat 'em up, the more flexible it is for you to program, and the less debugging it'll require, and less balancing it'll require. Beat 'em ups require a lot of balancing. So here we're going to go ahead and add in a dictionary. I don't actually think we can use a dictionary for this. Because I don't think dictionary is serialized in Unity. But it hasn't... I don't know if we've tried it yet. We'll go ahead and try it. So we don't need to care if it's the same. All we care about is if it's different. So we will say changes.add, and we'll need to add the key, which is the field.name, and we'll need to add the value, which is going to be v0.value. Like that. And then what we're going to do is return JSON utility dot to JSON and then the dictionary. We'll see whether or not that barfs. Unity's historical handling of dictionaries was very, very poor. Oh no, sorry, it's Wuxia. Well, I don't know if there's probably a game called Wuxia, but I'm talking about the martial art competitions rather than a specific game. But that's the string, the string kung fu stuff that you see in the movies all the time. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon stuff. It's worth noting that there's a big difference between the kinds of martial arts that is preferred in Hong Kong versus the kinds of martial arts preferred elsewhere in the nation and in other parts of Asia. So there's a lot of material to choose from. But if you go the path of the beat 'em up, you're going to end up with a game that requires a lot of nitpicking, a lot of very careful balancing. Any action game will require a lot of art assets, animations and stuff, but beat 'em ups require, like, is this one frame too long? And it's just kind of a pain in the ass if you're not used to it. Okay, so it doesn't understand how to... Oh, there we are. And Bamboy says Tai Tai coroutines. Don't know what that means. Ship serialization plus empty brackets. So where is our 4.3 meter? Oh, let's go ahead and change some of this stuff here. I'm going to go back into the ship component serializer. Oh, it doesn't say it anymore, that's why. Debug.log. What is this? This is in our ship component serializer? That's this here, right? Debug.log changes plus mix in serializations. Oh, you really don't want to think of it like that. Beat 'em ups are they require a ton of balancing, regardless of whether or not you're using coroutines. Um, if you haven't ever programmed a beat 'em up before, I really don't recommend taking it on unless you're doing it as a learning experience, because you will find that it is really obnoxious. For example, how long is a punch supposed to take? Well, that's not an easy question. You have to take into account things like, well, how long is the windup? How long is the recovery? Can it be changed into other punches? Chained into other punches? Can it be canceled? Can it be interrupted? How long is the strike? How many frames does it strike for? Where does it strike? Does the strike zone move? How large is the strike zone? How much damage does it do? And that's for every single sub technique in the game. Some techniques will have multiple choices like that built into them. It's really difficult to get all of that stuff to work together in a way that feels really great. But if you're not used to programming action games, I recommend sticking with something a little bit simpler, which doesn't require having 1,800 different moves. And a good example of that would be Star Ocean. All of the Star Ocean games, the characters only have a couple of basic moves, and then some spell effects that are basically generic with some particle effects. And because there's so few variations, it's really quite easy to balance. And that's not going to be very wuxia feeling, but you can get away with it. I was hoping that it would let me... That didn't work. Just for debug's sake, let's double it up. Well, if you don't like beat 'em ups, definitely don't try to make one. It's definitely a niche category, and you'll get ripped apart if you do it clumsily. Ripped apart by, you know, fans of the genre. But simpler beat 'em ups like Star Ocean work very, very well, or there are a lot of action RPGs like Ys. Well, lots of them actually. Secret of Mana. By using just a couple of different fight techniques and allowing you to switch between the characters live and giving the other characters some basic AI, they can get away with a lot, and it's fun to play. But you have to be careful to make sure that your AI characters aren't so dumb that they make you angry. So where is our 4-3? Here it is. 4-3 fuel tank has one mix in. Oh, it reverted. That's interesting. No, it didn't revert. It got respawned. What's going on here? Yeah, Kingdom Hearts is another action RPG. I don't know whether you're going with 2D or 3D. You have to think about the way action flows a little bit differently depending on that, but it's always pretty good. Kingdom Hearts tends to have a very vertical action flow, which makes it a little bit unique, even among 3D RPGs. Um, and that can require a little bit of camera work. Well, beat 'em ups. The strength of a beat 'em up is that you're fighting the same characters over and over, but the basic idea is that you are seeing them in different variations, and at different heights and different sort of level layouts. So if your number of enemies is limited, what you're going to want to do is play up the variation of the combat field. So if you only have like 2 different enemies, then it's very different depending on whether or not they're standing above you or trapped below you or rushing across at you. Using the same enemies, but giving them different tactical advantages and disadvantages, and giving the player a different layout where he can, push them off a cliff or go dodge behind a trap or whatever. All of those things add in a lot of value. Good example of that is most stealth games. There are very rarely very many different enemies in stealth games. I mean, Metal Gear Solid had like 3 different kinds of guards and a dog. But it was still very compelling because of the level layouts and the way that the guards would either be on patrol or not on patrol and all that stuff. But the more jumping you allow, the harder it is to do that. So it looks like the dictionary is not working out. I had hoped it would, but it is not. So what we're going to do instead is just store it as a string. Actually, can we convert the dictionary over into something? Like changes dot to send it to a string. Nope. Okay. Changes. Now it's an array. Should work. Or it could break, whichever. Oh, it doesn't take an arbitrary number of add calls? Fine. Five-meter hab crew, 5-meter hab crew. Looking for the fuel. 4-meter core, 4-meter core. 4-3, change amount equals 52. Brackets. What's with the brackets? Why are they just brackets? It should be telling us a list of strings. Super weird. I may have to go do art for a while just because might have to let my brain think about this. I haven't exactly been doing the most... brackets. Why is it just selling us brackets? It's just an array of strings. It should be like, here, string, string. But instead it's just brackets? Let's do some art. I'll go ahead and post some stuff to Twitter. Done coding for a while, now streaming some shipbuilding. Post. Alright, so I wanted to fix up a couple of things here. What's my Twitter handle? I'm Craig Perko. I can post it in. Give me a second to pull it up here. It's really hard to click on myself. There we are. So, we built this... I did all the work. You guys didn't do anything. We built this here, but it's not quite what I want to see. There are a couple of issues with it that I'd like to fix. One of the issues is that the front doesn't look quite right. It's nicely flat-ish, but it has some difficulty with what I want it to do in terms of looking. So I'm thinking... If I duplicate this and then I scale Y0 and then I rotate Z90, I can pull it out over here. But the problem is I flattened it, see? So what I need to do is grab the pieces and move them in the right spot. That should be fine. I can rotate X and bring them into alignment here. That'll do. Pink Hair says combat probably. Bamboy says I should tweet my art stuff. I don't really do very much art stuff as Craig Perko, so probably not going to do that. Pink Hair says, I think enemy variation probably matters less in games where the combat is intrinsically interesting. I think that's definitely true. And it's not necessarily combat, it's conflicts. So, for example, in Metal Gear Solid, there aren't very many different kinds of enemies, but you're not really combating them. Combat is kind of a last fallback. Instead, you're trying to avoid them. So even if the enemies aren't very interesting on their own, you can set up an environment where they are powerful and need to be dealt with in complicated ways. And even if your enemies are simple, that's going to work out. You're going to have a good time with that. The other thing I wanted to fix was this, which I thought was really ugly. So we'll go ahead and change it up a little bit. Boom, there we go. So what we're going to do here is chop off some of this interior. Oh. Pink Air says, having a few well-defined enemy types can be interesting because it's able to learn each one, which makes more interesting technical decisions. That is the basic idea, yep. If your game has interesting tactics, then you can get away with having fewer enemies because you've got more tactics. Now, whether or not you can pull that off, as a relatively new programmer is a question. All right, that looks pretty decent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld these faces together. Oh, that didn't work, did it? Oh, that didn't work, did it? All right, so that's not going to work. So let's delete this. Delete this. Yep, that is right, pink hair. I remember quite clearly the green werewolves in Final Fantasy 1. Palette swaps on the cheap. So what I wanted to do was create a better setup for our antenna so it didn't look quite so junky. Because it looked pretty junky. It's a debris filter. It's a debris catcher, like a cow catcher on a train, you know. So all of the delicate equipment that they're desperately trying to hide gets stuck out here on the outside of the ship. But it has to look good for the cameras, right? No, that's not what I wanted. A pull ring. That's true. It does have a little bit of a finger guard pull ring feel to it, doesn't it? So this is way too high poly. What do you say we bring this down a notch and just decimate this? Is there a fast way to decimate? Can we subdivide -1? No? Have fun, pink hair. I had dinner early today. Rather, I had lunch late. We'll go for the low budget version. Well, feel free to go goof off with ProBuilder. ProBuilder is fun to goof off with. So right now I'm going to build an antenna. Oh. And we're going to go ahead and shrink it a little bit. Where? So now we've got a cute little antenna. Of course, it's going to handle more than just the antenna-ing. It's going to handle doohickey-ing as well. what we're going to do is move the back face of this. Not you. And not you. Let's try that again. There's a new version of Blender coming out soon. Oh, Bamboy says, how do you texture your model, like the non-UV stuff? The non-UV stuff? Well, if you mean what kind of textures do I build, or how do I build the textures, I'm not really an expert at texture making at all, and so I can't recommend that you follow my advice on how to build textures. In the space travel system that I'm using, I'm making spaceships, and the way that we're doing that right now is I just have a couple of generic textures, and I assign materials to these objects based on which texture I think would look best on them. Later on, I will be combining them into a single system that does that a little bit better, but it's going to be a while before that's ready. Everyone's good at different things, so I really wouldn't recommend that you follow my example on art. They're probably worse people to learn from, but I don't know very much about 3D modeling. I'm doing this just because, it would be expensive to hire a full-time art guy or whatever. Alright, so let's go ahead and make some pipes, some piping. We're going to do it the fast and easy way. I forgot to turn keys on, didn't I? Sorry about that. I've been doing this for a while now, and I still screwed that up. There we go. Decent, decent. Alright, so let's go ahead and set this up with some UV mapping. I'll just go ahead and quickly fix that up. And let's go ahead and set up these materials properly. And let's save it and see how that looks in Unity. Oh, it looks just like the Blumpo. What a surprise. By the way, if any of you are wondering what the heck's going on, feel free to ask. in the chat. I'm trying to pay attention, so, you know. So as it stands, this is how it looks. Which is definitely a little bit better than before, but it still looks kind of bad-ish. Maybe we'll have to come back to it. For now, I think that's probably okay. I think that we're going to need to fix this up a little bit. Bamboy says dank memes, which I don't know what that means. So the idea with this ship is that it's going to be an attempt to look good, but in the end it just looks crap. So we're going to have it have some roles that it's going to have to take on, but it's going to want to have all those things fit within this frame that we're building. And that means that we're going to want to have some stuff that attaches to this boxy shape and looks good doing it. Or at least tries to look good doing it. And I think the best way to do that is to have a mount that locks into this sort of face. Yes, it was super effective. So, as a mounting bracket goes, we can go and delete these guys. I just use these. And then we can delete these faces here. There we are. And then we can take these guys and extrude them out. And scale Z. Scale Z. There we are. And extrude like this. Scale Z. Up. Scale Z. And extrude out like this. And we'll get ourselves a nice little mounting bracket thing. See how that's going to work? Let's bridge edge loops. Bridge edge loops and bridge edge loops. We'll go ahead and break this into 3, break this into 3, break this into 3. And we'll just choose this middle one. Turn on connected editing. And that's not going to work. So never mind. Disable. That's a little bit better. Now let's go ahead and create the final clamps. And the final clamps, we will go ahead and merge, 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 So, I'm not sure I want to put any music on my streams. I don't usually listen to music. I usually listen to Let's Plays, and I definitely don't think I want to put Let's Plays on my stream. Um, but the other issue is that a lot of people listen to my stream with their own music. A lot of people, uh, the few people that listen to my stream, listen to it with their own music a lot of the times, and it would be really obnoxious if I overrode that. Besides, my voice gets along well with whatever background music you have playing. Don't stop me now, having such a good time, having a ball. That was in case you were playing Queen. Yeah, yeah, Twitch is not as bad as YouTube, but it's still pretty bad. Do, 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 do. Bombay asks me what kind of Let's Plays. I tend to watch Let's Plays that aren't very loud, so probably not very many of your favorites. For example, Game Grumps is usually too loud. I can't put them on as background. Um, so, you know, I stick to quiet people that nobody else ever notices, like Salford Sal. So, and there is our mounting bracket. We don't need it to be mirrored. Let's disable the mirror here. We'll UV unwrap it. And if we're going to have some heavy hull elements, it's probably going to be the inside of these guys. Boom, 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 boom. Quill18 has plenty of great video logs for Ludum Dare, but they're useless without the audio. Yeah, yeah. Bamboy says, Game Grumps, ugh, just penis and farts jokes used to be better in JonTron. That's because they bleeped all of JonTron's jokes, so you couldn't tell that they all had the same themes. I actually really like Game Grumps, except for that Australian guy, because whenever I try and listen to one of his shows, he gets the sniffles and can't seem to stop sniffing directly into the mic all the time, and it makes me sick. But other than that, I really like him. Ross, that's his name. They do get repetitive, and they're very loud, so I can't listen to them for very long, but they seem to be good people. Ah, well, that's a wonderfully untextured block. Let's go ahead and put a texture on it. I think that I want it to taper. I think that's too big. So the easiest thing we want to do is actually add a mirror back in here. Really? That's your mirror point? I guess we won't put a mirror in. We'll do it manually. So, if we're going to taper it down, I guess the best bet is to select these guys, scale Z like this. That seems reasonably good. Let's go ahead and add in some smoothing here. Oh. Let's bevel, my favorite trick. There we go. Hopefully that will be a little bit better. Let's re-unwrap it since we've changed all the sizes of everything. Bamboy says, I feel like JonTron made Game Grumps talk about a wider variety of subjects. I don't think I agree. I think that they all still have... I mean, I don't watch every episode of Game Grumps either way, so maybe I've just been lucky or unlucky. But, I mean, I've heard Dan talk about literally everything I can think of. I mean, he even talks about things like chemical dependency or music or what tweets they sent out today on accident. And I think that that's fine. I like having a lot of variety. And I think they produce that now. Whether they produced it before or not, I don't know. JonTron always seemed to be more like a sidekick and less like part of the team. But I'm not an expert on any of them at all. Yeah, I think that looks okay. The textures look awful, but the rest of it looks okay. On the other hand, neither JonTron nor Danny really does Let's Plays, so I don't listen to them very much on their own. So there's the rough idea of the mounting bracket. Let's go ahead and bevel the hell out of it, just so that it has a little bit of lack of sharpness. It's really like fake sharp at the moment, so sharp that it looks stupid. And we're going to go ahead and fix that. I think that we've got the same thing selected. Let's go ahead and try it. Yeah, that should work. Oh, I unselected something. Just a little bit of not sharpness. have to say that that is probably the worst UV mapping. Grind, grind, grind. Shaggy Man asks, doesn't Blender have the ability to check textures and shading without having to jump back into Unity? Yeah, it does, but I can't get Blender's materials system to behave well with Unity. And it might just be because I keep switching versions of Unity, but whenever I set up a material in Blender, it doesn't import properly, especially when I'm working with complex materials that aren't, the default ones. In this case, the materials I'm actually slapping on this have a variety of scaling issues. They're scaled differently, and that is it makes it a little bit difficult for me to put them into Blender and have that constantly mirror what's going on. In the end, yeah, I probably should do it in Blender. As I mentioned, I'm not the greatest at the art stuff, especially since I'm just slapping these textures together. As you can see, some of them are really pretty bad. Well, I think that's probably okay for now. I can always adjust it later. But there we have a clamp for the various things that we're going to want to attach to the ship, like tanks of fuel, rockets, big-ass sensors, all sorts of modules like that. But that's not going to be just this. We're also going to need to have other kinds of attachment points. I'm thinking of angle attachments off the the side at 45 degrees or 30 degrees this way. So a version of this bracket that goes up and out rather than as it is here. So let's move that out of the way for now and go ahead and create a new set of surface mounts. Mounting bracket diagonal. And we'll go ahead and call this one mounting bracket straight. Or side. Oh, I didn't catch the right values. Damn it, that's fine. So I don't think we need that much of the roof. Actually, it might be better to do it the other way, like this. There we are. And we'll do the same thing with the side. We'll delete these two. But we'll have the same basic idea. Scale X down. Scale Z down. And then we'll want to change it out here. These are all too low, aren't they? They are. Alright, we can go ahead and bring these up. So what we want to end up doing is creating a loop right here. Let's go ahead and build ourselves a circle. We can do 32, that's fine. Rotate X 90, bring it out. Rotate X 90. Rotate X 90. There we are. Bring it up, bring it back, bring it out like this. So let's go ahead and sync it up with our exact position. Then we'll go ahead and extrude it back here and sync it up here as well. Here we are. Clickety clickety. We can scale these up without worrying about displacing the whole thing. And let's go ahead and put them like this. And then we're going to go ahead and cut them up into the same sort of brackets, like so. And we're going to want to delete a lot of these bands, like this one, and these here, like so. That's more or less right. Let's go ahead and bring up some loops to merge in here. And to merge them, we'll just pick loops on the same basic size over on the other side. And I guess higher is better. And bridge those edge loops. Nope, that didn't work out at all. That's okay, this is wrong too. Good, that works. I was worried that it wouldn't. There we are. And for some reason this set is backwards. So we're going to take some action to make this feel a little bit less sudden. Oh, that's backwards too, huh? I guess it's because there's no interior. It's one freaky looking bulldozer. Believe it or not, that's actually what I'm building. The mineral mining capabilities of these ships are one of their big advantages over T-0 ships. But the way you mine an asteroid is you bulldoze it. Alternately, you can go into it and do some stuff inside of it. But by and large, bulldozing is actually what we're going to be doing with a lot of these ships. This ended up a little bit high. Let's go ahead and fix it if I can. I guess we'll have to do it the hard way. Fine. Alright, so let's go ahead and merge some edge loops again. Now this isn't a symmetrical object in terms of the upside and the downside being exactly the same, so we may end up with a, you know, a lopsided feel, but that should be okay because this ship is not perfectly symmetrical radially. Just flip these. And we got a nice smooth arc off of the other one. Let's try for that same thing here. Uh, Close enough. So, let's delete this spare off the top, and let's go ahead and create the inside of this bulldozer. There we go. We got the inside of the bulldozer. Now, we deleted out some of the framing from the other guy, and I think that's probably what we want to do here as well. So... four and three. Make it 3 and 3. Delete faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Delete faces. Delete faces. Bridge edge loops. Bridge edge loops. And let's do some beveling. Boom, 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 bevel. And now these egregiously flat surfaces, we'll just take a little bit of the edge off of them. And bevel. And lastly, bevel. All right, let's unwrap it. Set it up with a couple of different materials here. We're not going to need any glass. Heavy hole for the insides, like so. That should look odd, but that's fine. Let's just go ahead and see how that looks. Oh, we got to take out the mirror. Goodbye, mirror. We don't need you. Well, I'm probably going to end after this. I don't know whether or not anyone found my stream extraordinarily exciting today. All I really did was work on some JSON utilities stuff and try and create some mounting brackets for this ship. Neither of which is, you know, top-tier entertainment. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, let's not do that. This is odd. For some reason, those are all defined as the other material. Oh, because the roof that I extruded them from was the other material. I see. Bamboy says, see ya. I'll see ya, Bamboy. I stream Wednesdays and Saturdays, so if you want to see me again, you can stop by next week or in a couple of days. Your choice. That is backwards. Although it's all temporary anyway. What I really want to do is, before I sign off, I'm going to go ahead and tweak the normals here. And see whether or not I can get this to look a little bit less like plastic. Ah, there we are. That's much better. It's still kind of bad, though. Let's take it down to 40. Alright, now those beveled edges look like beveled edges, and that's where I'll leave it for today. We got a lot of work to do in the future, but for now, we are starting to see some of what this is going to be. All of these ships require a lot of work. As anyone who's ever built these kinds of assets knows, they're not super easy. So I'll go ahead and post this. Let's move this back and move this forward. And then I'll post this as my stream finisher on Twitter. Oh, I just realized that my stream froze like hours and hours ago. I hope it didn't freeze for everyone else and only for me. Ooh, well, either way, I suppose you can watch it on repeat if that happened to you. See you around, everybody.